Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, how you doing, everybody? It is Tuesday morning. That's when we do the show. Tuesday, March 30th, 2021. Time for another show. It is Kagro in the morning. I'm Kagro. It's the morning. I'm here. You're here. What else could we possibly do? Morning's not a pizza time, so we have to move on to the learning about Cuba, I guess. This morning on tap, hey, I don't know. I wasn't going to go here, but as it turns out, there's hot stories to be had. We'll round them up the best we can do, and then, of course, chat with Joan in the later part of the show. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. I have been reliably informed by vaccine passport Nazi Bill in Portland, Maine. I don't know. That's the morning story. We'll get to that in just a second. But the show's live now. Today, though, Joe Biden unveils his infrastructure plan tomorrow. So today we'll tell you that he unveils it tomorrow. That's what we'll be doing. So today, I, Kagro X, will announce what kind of bridge he wants built on his front lawn. Oh, good idea. All Americans get to choose the bridge or infrastructure edition that they want, which once we get to the big infrastructure project. It has to be shovel ready, though, so make sure that it's something fun and exciting. And if you had talked to me earlier in the winter, I had a couple of things that were shovel ready for you, but no one was anywhere to be found. So decide what kind of bridge you want on your front lawn. My choice is drawbridge, covered bridge. Oh, that's a good one. Arch bridge or suspension bridge. Can I get one of those super modern suspension bridges that just has like the one, what do you call it? One tower. And every city seems to be building some variant of that fantastic new bridge design. Let's all have one of those. Covered bridge is a good idea, though. You can turn your driveway into a covered bridge, then you wouldn't have to shovel it, I guess, unless you got a huge storm and then you have to climb up on the roof and shovel that thing off. We'll see. All right, let's round up today's stories of the day. I wasn't really planning on going this way, but as it turns out, the Republicans and libertarians have coordinated their message today. I'm not even entirely sure what they're responding to exactly, but I know it's been discussed for months now, since we've had the vaccine and since we were even anticipating the vaccine, that there might be some sort of importance attached, generally speaking, to people's vaccination records, given that, we've just come through and are still in the middle of a global pandemic and a potentially deadly disease attached to it. If you get your vaccine and can show that you're vaccinated, you might be entitled to certain additional, additional access to indoor spaces. As I recall, I haven't read the CDC guidance all that closely, and that's really something that we depend on Greg for, but you will likely have seen announcements to the effect that if you are fully vaccinated and are with others who are likewise fully vaccinated, that you can spend time indoors together unmasked, at least in relatively small groups. And I guess the key to that is to be able to assure yourself of the vaccine status of those around you and those around you of your vaccine status, and I guess the owner of whatever venue. It might come to pass that we find ourselves in a situation where those who have chosen to get vaccinated and who are fully immunized can enjoy different gathering situations, I guess. I don't know what kind of word you want to hang on it. Than people who either haven't been vaccinated yet or are resisting the vaccine, which is, of course, no different than you usually find in registering your kids for school in public school districts that have vaccination requirements for measles, mumps, etc., polio vaccine, the usual collection of required vaccines, and you can demonstrate that the kids have been so vaccinated they'll let your kids into school. There are, of course, school systems that have different exemptions, are sometimes allowed to to parents for various reasons, but generally speaking, you kind of do have to show that your kids have been vaccinated. If you're traveling to another country, there are places that won't let you in unless you can verify that you're vaccinated in certain ways. There are countries that won't let you back home if you've traveled abroad, unless you have traveled out ahead of time with certain vaccines. If you're headed to an area known to host a certain disease that is got a vaccine, this does happen. It's just a normal kind of response to disease in general. And there's a pretty good reason behind it, but okay, I understand that people get upset about it, especially, of course, if they are anti-vaxxers, whether anti-vaxxers generally or just opposed to the vaccine for whatever reason, whatever they've read they've done their own research on the internet, let's say, and so they've come to oppose the administration of the coronavirus vaccine. All of them, any of them, one in particular, doesn't really matter. Anyway, they have got it in their heads that the talking point for today is that a vaccine certificate that demonstrates that you've had your vaccine is essentially the same thing as the yellow Jewish stars, the six-pointed stars that Nazis required Jews to wear on their clothing in public. It's really quite amazing, and so many things wrong with it. It just came to my attention this morning that this is a big freak out, but somebody pointed me to a tweet from the verified account, so it's for real, from the Libertarian Party of Kentucky, which, the Libertarian Party of anywhere is, who cares, right? But in Kentucky, I guess it's a thing because Rand Paul, who is the senator there, considers himself to be something of a libertarian, though he's a Republican. He's doesn't serve in Congress as a Libertarian Party member necessarily. But anyway, this is what they're up to. And they are fairly certain that these things are equivalent to. They actually make this kind of. Let me pull it up. What's their thing? Are the vaccine passports going to be yellow, shaped like a star, and sewn on our clothes? That's the that's the tweet. In response to what? I don't know. It just sort of is out there in terms of somebody expressed the idea. I don't even know what the original expression of the idea that touched this off is, but it's coming from all quarters. And if you start looking around on Twitter for vaccine passport, you'll hit a couple examples of it very quickly. And I happen to see Mike Huckabee out there today doing the same thing, pulling the same stunt, plus a lot of other right-wing Twitter personalities who I have never heard of, but who make themselves obvious as Twitter personalities. But it's also interesting. Obviously there's the fairly significant problem with the idea because they've gotten it backwards. Well, on its face, the worst thing about it, of course, is comparing the Holocaust, which, of course, killed millions, and the vaccine, which, of course, is likely to save millions, but whatever. So, the comparison's very strong, obviously. We singled out a group of people with this badge that we should kill, whereas we now have singled out a group of people with this badge who, one, won't die from the disease, and two, to whom we might afford additional privileges. It's a little weird and a little backwards. So not only is it a poor casual comparison of something routine to the Holocaust, which is idiotic in its own right, but it gets the whole thing backwards. Now, you could complain, well, we shouldn't have, separate classes of citizenship, if you want to view it that way, as between those who are vaccinated and those who are unvaccinated. But one, I wouldn't go so far as to say that it does create that, and two, it's pretty simple I mean, I assume that people who really want to carry this metaphor forward, where you say, well, it's simple science. These people are immunized against the disease and these people are not. Well, there was a scientist in the Nazi party who said that you could explain the differences by simple science too, and his name was Joseph Mengele, and yeah, okay, well, no, it has nothing to do with that. And again, this is about the idea that you can return to normal life, which is, of course, what you've been advocating the whole time. So it's not the strongest position I've ever seen, that's for sure. In addition to which, well, shall we answer the questions? No, the vaccine passports aren't going to be yellow. I mean, I don't think so. I don't know exactly what they're talking about. I mean, I've seen vaccine cards that people have gotten. They give you one when you get your first shot, if you are taking one of the 2-shot courses, Moderna or Pfizer, and it says the type of shot you got and the date you got it. And then after the requisite number of weeks, you can come back and ask for a second shot. And they'll say, did you get your first shot? And you'll say, yep. And they'll say, can you prove it? And you'll say, as a matter of fact, I can. Here's a card. Well, did you wait the right number of weeks? I don't know for sure. I think I did, but this here card says I got my shot X number of weeks ago. From which this administrator of vaccines might deduce, yes, look, it's been 3 weeks. It's been 2 weeks, 4 weeks. I don't know which one goes with which shot anymore. I don't bother. I know when I'm supposed to go, and that's it. I didn't do the counting, but whatever number of weeks, like they probably get a qualified professional who knows how to math and everything, and they can say, yeah, look at that. You can get the second dose. And then I'll write down on your card that you got your second dose and what manufacturer made this second dose and what the date of your second dose was. After which, counting 2 weeks after that second dose or whatever it is, right? After that, you can consider yourself fully vaccinated and fully immunized. And then, if you want to go to a place where it is in coordination with CDC guidance, a private property owner has set perhaps a policy that says you may congregate in groups larger than 10 without masks, but only indoors, that is, only among those who are vaccinated. Now, you might find Rand Paul at the door of one of these places saying, let me in, I'm immune. Then you will say, the relevant question is, are you vaccinated? And he will say, I said I'm immune. And they will say, well, we mean something very specific, vaccinated. Can you show us, can you demonstrate for us that you have, in fact, in some verifiable form that we should trust, even if you faked it, even if you forged it? I mean, there's only so much we can do with this. But if you would like to commit perjury, go ahead, I suppose. And it wouldn't be perjury. He's not sworn under oath, etc. But I guess you could try to put him under oath. Anyway, the point is, if you can demonstrate quickly and easily that you meet the qualifications, go ahead. Shop in our store. Meet in our facility. Whatever it may be. Come to work and stay in the office. These are the sorts of things, by the way, which, if you were wearing at the right time and place, if there is such a thing, or the correct point in history, anyway, the point we're discussing, if you were wearing a yellow passport shaped like a star and sewn on your clothes and said, let me in to enjoy the privilege of mingling in this indoor space, you might find that the authorities there say, well, you have this badge we're talking about, and because of that badge, the answer is no, you cannot come in. Wow, that sort of feels a little opposite from the sign, from the situation where do you have the badge? You do have the badge. Come on in. Now, you could analogize and say, do you have the badge that we're looking for? Yes, it's my Nazi SS badge. you can come in, and the people with the yellow stars can't. But it's just odd to see them sort of starting out by getting it backwards. And I understand the larger point of, well, some badges say yes and some badges say no. But this badge doesn't say anything in particular. And it's not a badge, and it's not yellow, and it's not shaped like a star, which is an insult in its own right. And it's not sewn on your clothes. It's, if you want it, you carry it around with you. And if you want to go into whatever here, Target, I don't know. My mind was flashing back to like old, defunct stores. For some reason, me being a New Jersey area kid from the 70s and 80s, if you want to go into Two Guys or something, Caldor or whatever, you got to show your vaccine passport. And it's not even really going to be like that. But they're insisting that it is. And I find it weird and stupid and obviously offensive as well. But, that's, I think, a given. Anyway, just watching it happen, I saw Mike Huckabee making the same comments. It's apparently a widely disseminated talking point for Republicans today. Absolutely stupid and absolutely a terrible analogy. Absolutely a terrible time to do it in the middle of Passover also. Not a great choice. But that's what they're going with. And I find it weird to see it on Twitter, too. This claim that, as I said, all badges are equally dangerous, says this verified person with a blue check mark next to their name that affords special privileges on Twitter. We don't want to create first and second class citizenship with an identifier like this, says the person carrying the identifier establishing first class Twitter citizenship. It seems sort of weird. No, that's dumb. That's a totally different thing. That has nothing to do with whether you're vaccinated or not. It has nothing to do with whether you're Jewish or not. I know, but you were making a broader metaphor, and one of the things about those metaphors is that they're more broadly applicable. No, does not register with them. So, okay, that's kind of where we are in the USA today. And I'm not talking about the newspaper either. But all right, well, there we go. Let's see. What else have we got to share with you today? Oh, plenty of people promising wonderful things if I'll sign up with their program in the email. But that's not what I was looking for. Just clicked on the wrong link. Oh, look at this. Here's an interview available with a political analyst on filibuster reform. Do you think I should invite this person to help us straighten this out? The president of Party Politics US. Okay, I don't know who it is, but I'm sure that would be super interesting. I don't know. Okay, well, I get a lot of weird pitches about that, and the ones about inviting people on to discuss the filibuster are always interesting. It's nice when it's people that I know or recognize. But I don't know, maybe I'll be introduced to somebody new and exciting who I'll enjoy recognizing later on through one of these pitches. You never know. Okay, now into the collection of stories for today. Oh, look at this. My first up, my Pocket has stored for me. I'm sure I was storing a story that I thought was very interesting for you, but instead what I've got is a notice that JavaScript is not available. So that was really well executed there. Twitter, I guess it was something from Twitter, and I put it aside and probably thought it was going to be interesting. And maybe it was even, you know what, I'm thinking it was maybe the Libertarian Party tweet. Let me try it again and see if Twitter saves it any better this time. I don't think so. Let's see. I'll get rid of the one that was useless. And if not, then I'll just keep the tab open and we'll work that way. But all right. Yeah, JavaScript is not available. So everything's working great as between Twitter on the desktop and Pocket. All right. Stories that I wanted to bring you. How about stories I wanted to bring you earlier in the week? Some of them from as recently as yesterday, Monday, because that was the beginning of the week, that I didn't get to blurt out in time. I got distracted by the other breaking news stories. Yesterday's breaking news story that I forgot to tell you, reported to us here by CNN News from, where was this? Louisiana. You may recall Representative-elect Luke Letlow, who was, mildly, what should we say, just sort of barely on the Republican bandwagon in terms of sometimes portraying COVID-19 as a hoax, sometimes taking it seriously, sometimes masking, sometimes protesting the fact that he was expected to wear a mask, and then got COVID. I guess we'll get the chronology right. Got elected, got COVID, got dead, and then didn't show up, for the swearing in Congress on account of the deadness. I mean, I don't mean to be terribly disrespectful. I just want to be a little bit mildly disrespectful in pointing out that, you died from a preventable disease because you went around insisting, from time to time anyway, that the disease not only didn't need to be prevented, but might not even be real, and now you're dead. And the impact has been felt throughout Louisiana and is rippling through the fabric of Louisiana society there in district, whatever it is. And everything's different now. For instance, that congressional seat that he won now belongs to his wife. Not because he left it to her in his will, but because, in some places when somebody gets elected and whether they serve or not, and they die, and they say, we need somebody else to replace that person, they say, in America, we replace that person with a member of their family. And we do it from time to time and in a lot of places. And sometimes it's just the shock of losing somebody so unexpectedly and then having a special election and people say, I don't know who the hell we should put there. And the local party says, how about one of the family members runs, and everyone will feel sorry for the family and they'll reward you with the congressional seat. And it's kind of dumb, but that's how we end up doing it sometimes. And, the people have to vote to do it. So if you get enough people who don't think about it very deeply or who aren't presented with very many choices, this can happen. So now Julia Letlow, which at least, she doesn't have the alliterative name. I find that an improvement. Now set to take over that congressional seat. The headline at CNN, look at my family, use my story. Representative-elect Julia Letlow urges Republicans to get COVID vaccine after husband's death. I believe we've read it with the right inflection there. It's not that she's urging people whose husbands have died to get the vaccine in particular, although I'm sure that she would. But anyway, it's good to see that Republicans are encouraging people to get the vaccines. It may very well have been the case that Julia Letlow would have urged you to get the COVID vaccine before her husband died, before her husband contracted COVID. She might have been encouraging it the whole time. We don't know. I'm glad she's doing it now. It could be another one of those instances where Republicans, awaken to the reality of what people should be doing to help protect themselves, but only when the bad thing happens to them. And then, now I'm not a vaccine denialist. I want everybody to get it. So I don't think the news reported in the article is particularly exciting. But, whatever. I just wanted to sort of bring you up to speed on that. So now we at least know what has happened to Louisiana's, which district is it? I want to say 6th, but I don't even know why. It just sort of sticks in my head, but it might not have anything to do with it. Does it say in here? I don't think so. All right, I'll put the mug down since I'm busy talking and I can't get to drink the tea anyway. Might as well put the mug down. All right, well, 5th district. There we go. Everything in my life and marriage has led me to this one moment in time. Interesting. I'm so honored and excited to serve the people of the 5th district. Okay. I mean, why not? Anyway, that's news. Maybe she'll encourage all the rest of the Republicans serving in the House to get their vaccines. And now, though, we'll have a new hurdle. We'll have to... We learned a while ago that there are so many Republicans who are declining to answer the question for the office of the attending physician, whether or not they have had this vaccine, and maybe the arrival of another member who advocates for the vaccine and whose husband was supposed to be there as a member but died of the disease. That might, I don't know, maybe it'll change some minds, maybe it won't. Let's see. Now, Ricky had some comments on the situation saying, I'm not sure if it's a freak out. It's something that I worry about. Vaccine passports could become something to discriminate against those who may not be able to get the vaccine. It's entirely possible, true. And there are always going to be a minority of people who find themselves on the outs over any requirement, really, whether it's meant to discriminate against people or not. And, the complaint is very often quite valid, whether it's access for the disabled or based on something else. Yeah, it's true, and there'll be people who can't get the vaccine for one reason or another. But the plain fact of it is, if you remain vulnerable to the disease or more likely to be carrying it because you lack the protection of the vaccine, then you might need to make some alternative arrangements in order to make your way through daily life. And as difficult as it will be, I can't recommend in good conscience a regime by which, we've forgotten to start our music, so we'll cut out a little early. A regime by which the fact that you have a very good excuse for not having gotten the vaccine gives you a pass in situations where it might be dangerous to the health of others, perhaps where others are immune compromised. We'll be right back. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, entering in a different part in the music today to try to make up for the fact that we started it late. All right, well, at any rate, it seems to me, though, just to sum up on the vaccine passports, certainly I think what is happening among the ranks of Republicans and Libertarians qualifies as a freakout. Comparing it to the Holocaust, I think, qualifies pretty well as a freakout. But certainly I think there's room for expressing certain doubts or asking questions if you are one of the people who think that you might, for whatever reason, not have access to the vaccine, not be able to get the vaccine for medical reasons, but are, especially if you are, I guess if you're making the argument that you are safe for some other reason, like Rand Paul might be doing, saying that we carry antibodies to the disease by virtue of having contracted it earlier, but I'd want to hear some science on that one, or whatever. You are otherwise, immune compromised and can't get the vaccine, or whatever the particular situation might be. But I think probably if you are dealing with that situation already, you might be prepared to deal with the situation going forward and saying, all right, well, I know that there are certain accommodations I have to make for being unvaccinated against several diseases formerly known as pandemics, now mostly controlled and eradicated diseases. But there are also some other interesting points being made by others, like the fact that so many of the people, let's say the more famous among them who are making a big deal of it and making comparisons to the Holocaust and having that particular freak out. It's odd how many of them have no particular problem, for instance, searching kids in school either on suspicion of drugs or even worse now in these the new situation we find ourselves in, or at least did find ourselves in back when schools were widely open across the country, with transgender students and requiring that they essentially display for school administrators the physical markers of their birth gender or current gender or whatever, so that they can be sorted properly for the use of locker rooms and bathrooms. That seems to be no problem. But do you have a card that says that you're vaccinated, or some other explanation as to why we ought to admit you to the premises despite not being vaccinated? That's also the same thing as the Holocaust. And okay, well, I think we can separate several of these situations into more meaningful categories at some point. Anyway, we'll be discussing it tomorrow, I'm sure, at some point, tomorrow or Thursday with Greg, when we also talk about the fact that so many states are getting set to launch new, looser COVID restrictions based on, I don't know, something they heard a couple of weeks ago about how much better things were getting, even though as we get ready to roll these things out, all indications are that things are in fact getting worse, and we are in for what some writers are calling a fourth surge in the disease. And meanwhile, here in Virginia, we are set for an April 1st, great day to roll out anything new and serious, April 1st, loosening of restrictions that will see us permitted to gather in groups indoors of up to 50 people, up from 10, based on nothing more than the fact that prevalence of the disease in the community is twice as high as it was when we decided that we were going to go to 10. But okay, seems like the science is getting away from us a little bit. And I suppose in that sense, it might be worth freaking out a little bit about establishing standards like vaccine passports when we're doing things, when the same people who were setting that policy are also saying things like, sure, prevalence of the disease is much higher than it was, let's gather people in larger groups indoors, then I might say, maybe this passport is a dumb idea. All right. Well, anyway, we can move on from this one, since I certainly can't add any medical expertise to it, so we might as well wait until tomorrow. We can discuss the other news of the day, which is that I learned how to pronounce the name at some point, and I don't know whether I remember it correctly, but Ghislaine Maxwell finally now indicted on actual sex trafficking charges. She's been held on charges related to the larger trafficking suspicions. I mean, I guess that's all we can say they are, legally speaking, at the moment, against Jeffrey Epstein, who, of course, is also dead, but not from COVID-19. But Ghislaine Maxwell charged with sex trafficking in this particular case of one particular 14-year-old girl, according to the New York Times. A new indictment accuses Ms. Maxwell, because it's the New York Times, of paying a victim of her longtime associate, Jeffrey Epstein, which, of course, is the whole idea of the story behind the two, and that what everybody has always accused her of having done. And now I guess they've built the case to the point where they can actually indict. So let's see. Benjamin Weiser put this story together yesterday. Ghislaine Maxwell, longtime associate of Jeffrey Epstein, charged on Monday for the first time with sex trafficking of a minor, as federal prosecutors accused her of grooming a 14-year-old girl to engage in sexual acts with Mr. Epstein and later paying her. I guess I've always found it interesting, too, that things are always described that way. I mean, Maxwell, I guess, is, fabulously wealthy in her own right. But, of course, Epstein was chiefly famous for being not just a regular pervert, but an extremely rich pervert, He may have stolen all the money, but supposedly a self-made billionaire. And I'm just curious about the arrangement between the two of them, that it always seems like Maxwell is the one paying these girls their grooming and trafficking. And I'm a minor point, but I guess I'm just curious. What exactly is going on here again? She's paying. Is he paying her back? Is he giving her the money to do this? Is she enjoying paying for it for some other weird reason? I don't know. I mean, absolutely the least important of the details in terms of, actually revealing the ghastliness of what went on here. But I suppose it might become important in terms of making a case against her. Anyway, the new federal indictment filed in Manhattan charged that on multiple occasions between 2001 and 2004, this girl in question here, do we really have to get into the details? You all know what he was into. It's not like New York Times is getting super graphic or anything, but I don't know. It's just at some point, I don't know what, harmful to keep talking about this, but All right, well, we'll just read the story as written. So in 2001 to 2004, the girl provided nude massages to Mr. Epstein at his Palm Beach, Florida estate, during which he engaged in sex acts with her. I always find that construction odd, sex acts. Like, I don't know. The idea that it's an act. I mean, it's an act, but it makes me think of like a theatrical act. Anyway, the new charges against Ms. Maxwell go further than those contained in an earlier indictment that accused her of helping Mr. Epstein recruit, groom, and ultimately sexually abuse girls, but did not include sex trafficking allegations. The new indictment says that after the girl provided Mr. Epstein with the massages, Ms. Maxwell or others who worked for him paid the girl hundreds of dollars in cash. A lawyer for Ms. Maxwell did not respond to a request for comment on the new charges. The indictment comes almost 9 months after Ms. Maxwell, now 59, and once a fixture on New York's social scene, was arrested in New Hampshire on charges she had lured underage girls, one as young as 14, here's one of them, into Mr. Epstein's orbit and contributed to his abuse of them. The indictment issued on Monday cites an additional 14-year-old girl who was identified only as minor victim 4. Ms. Maxwell has been jailed since her arrest last year and is awaiting trial scheduled for July in federal district court in Manhattan. She's pleaded not guilty to the original charges. The new indictment also says Epstein and Maxwell each encouraged the girl to recruit other young women to provide sexualized massages to Mr. Epstein. He's kind of disgusting. Okay. In response, the indictment says the girl brought multiple women and girls to provide erotic massages. The law is looking for more modifiers of the massage word. It's like, we get it already. Anyway, provide more massages for Epstein. Both she and the people she recruited were paid hundreds of dollars in cash. Epstein, described here as having hanged himself in his cell in a jail in Manhattan in August of 2019, a month after his arrest on sex trafficking charges. An indictment said Epstein had recruited dozens of minor girls to engage in sex acts with him at his mansion in Manhattan and the Palm Beach estate, after which he paid them hundreds of dollars in cash. Prosecutors, in expanding their case against Ms. Maxwell, not only added 2 new counts, sex trafficking of a minor and sex trafficking conspiracy, but they also broadened the time period of the allegations they have made. The original indictment alleged crimes by Ms. Maxwell from 1994 through 1997, leading her lawyers to argue, as they unsuccessfully sought her release on bail, that it was inherently more difficult to prosecute cases relating to decades-old conduct. They said that that helped to call into question the strength of the government's case. The sex trafficking of minor victim 4 occurred, of course, between 2001 and 2004, so I guess 1 decade less in the past. It adds that Ms. Maxwell met the 14-year-old girl at the Palm Beach residence and over the next 3 years interacted there with her quite frequently, knowing she was a minor. The government made it clear in its original indictment that the process of grooming victims for sexual activity, the seemingly innocuous behavior by a predator to break down a victim's barriers to abusive conduct, would be a central part of its case against Ms. Maxwell. So, all right, it's good that they have pinpointed this and turned it into a trafficking case, as we all anticipated it would be. That's the news. There's several other angles on it, and I think probably still more to be developed. Maybe we'll return to the story when the reporters who have really specialized in following this story can give us some more context. Okay, let's see. Other things to update you on. I did see this one passed around on Twitter yesterday relating to the filibuster situation. Maybe something we want to talk to Joan about later on. But this from Politico, and Politico's Ilana Shore, who, not only discussing the possibility of a fourth surge, but also, after dropping that bit here, heads on to discussing the filibuster, and has this interesting entry which she labels as history lesson. I'm not so certain it's absolutely instructive for where we are now, but it's history and true, and I guess we can sort of bake it into the cake now, although I'm not entirely sure that it serves as a template for today's situation. But this is it. With the Senate divided 50-50 and the majority party struggling to get all of its own members behind essential parts of its agenda, the leaders of the upper chamber tried to harness the obscure power of the Congressional Budget Act to muscle through multiple proposals without having to worry about a filibuster by the minority. I think what this is describing, I mean, it's a little flowery in the language, but describing the proposal we noted yesterday of at least one method of using offering more reconciliation bills to power through other parts of the Democratic agenda. It's not entirely clear that this is related to the play to pass a revised budget resolution that would include more reconciliation instructions, or whether it's some other play. But it does note here that the Senate parliamentarian, its nonpartisan rules referee, said no to the majority party's gambit, aggravating powerful lawmakers. And I guess I should check in to see, there's not a whole lot of news about it, but I'll see if there's any more news on reconciliation and a revised budget in the news, so we can clear up whether, in fact, the new proposal has been outright rejected. I don't see anything. All I see at the top of the list here is Vox explainer on the idea of using reconciliation more often this year, which I think we explained pretty adequately yesterday. But no definitive word that I can see in the news search for a rejection of the particular plan that we discussed yesterday. But I guess this hints at it. All right. But it goes on here to say that I guess if the Senate parliamentarian were eventually to say no to the proposed, or say no in terms of approving the gambit of revising the budget and adding new reconciliation instructions and trying again, leaves us in this situation. That sounds like a summary of Democrats' headaches this year, but in fact, I just recapped the spring of 2001, writes Ilana Shore for Politico, when then parliamentarian Robert Dove lost his job. The cause, according to reports at the time, GOP leaders' frustrations with his rulings to limit the scope of bills they could pass under reconciliation. Goes on to say, despite some liberals' agitation to fire the current parliamentarian, I've seen people do it, but okay. It hasn't been an interest of mine at the moment, but okay. Despite this agitation to fire the current parliamentarian, Elizabeth McDonough, she's unlikely to suffer the same fate as Robert Dove. Looking back 20 years helps explain why that's true. I read it already. I disagree that it helps explain anything, but okay. The Senate was split 50-50 when Dove got shown the door, with Republicans holding the same narrow control of the chamber that Democrats do today. So far, so good. Republicans got rid of Dove after he ruled against them on a proposal to give appropriators a $5 billion fund for natural disasters using reconciliation. I don't remember the situation exactly, or this one in particular, the $5 billion fund for natural disasters. But as Dove explained later on, that's not how the budget process works, he told Georgetown Law School in 2010. But he had also rankled the Republican majority by telling them that the reconciliation rules allowed them to pass only one tax bill during that budget year. I might follow the link and find out about what he told the people at Georgetown Law School, see if I can get a better understanding of this. At any rate, I do remember that Dove definitely frustrated their purposes, their intentions of using reconciliation, and that they did in fact fire him. This year's Democratic majority is asking McDonough to let them use the same budget resolution, which makes me think either we have imprecise reporting here or the result of a different question, right? But this year's Democratic majority is asking McDonough to let them use the same budget resolution to pass extra reconciliation measures. A different interpretation of budget law, but one that might strike her as just as much of a stretch. If McDonough gives Democrats the sort of leeway now that Dove didn't give Republicans in 2001, President Joe Biden's party has a shot at passing at least 3 more major bills without the need for Senate GOP votes before next election. If she says no to Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrats might want to consider what happened after Dove lost his job before they hand McDonough a pink slip. Now, before I get on to that, again, I just want to say the way this is framed up is, I think it might be a little facile to say that what this hinges on is, well, if McDonough opts to, arguably save her job by, as she says, giving the Democrats the sort of leeway now that Dove didn't give Republicans in 2001, then something. Although, I mean, the similarity, I think, might end at, well, the Democrats are making a request of the parliamentarian now, and Republicans were making a request of the parliamentarian then. But it's not the same request. They were asking for, well, according to this, for using reconciliation to create a $5 billion fund for natural disasters. And I'm not certain why that rankled Dove at the time, but I guess we could follow the link and find out. But also, they asked for, the ability to pass an additional tax bill under reconciliation rules and reconciliation instructions that apparently, in Dove's mind, only permitted one such reconciliation bill. And they wanted more, and he said no. But that's maybe some similarity. They wanted, I guess, in this telling of it, Democrats are asking for the ability to pass at least one more reconciliation bill based on the same instructions from the same budget, and Republicans likewise were asking for the ability to pass a second reconciliation bill in one set of instructions. But one was a tax bill that would cut taxes and presumably, and therefore have I guess the old argument would go anyway, an inflationary impact on the debt and the national and the federal deficit. Whereas, I guess the financial impact of whatever the Democrats are proposing might be said to be the same, but it's not a tax vehicle. And that could make an important difference in the way the parliamentarian views this thing. It wouldn't surprise me at all if McDonough said, well, the fact that you're asking for the ability to pass an additional reconciliation bill is similar, but the two types of bills are so dissimilar that they really ought not to be considered analogous to one another. And the only similarity is that the effect is you're asking for the ability to pass a second reconciliation bill on one set of instructions. On the other hand, if the request is, if we passed a second budget resolution that included more reconciliation instructions, then there's no analogy really to be made at all, except you would have in front of you the question of whether or not you can simply pass a second budget resolution and therefore entitle yourself to another reconciliation bill. I guess there's room for a parliamentarian to say it's really not meant to be used that way. But I think there's probably also room for saying, if you want to go through the trouble of passing another budget resolution, which is no small feat, then yeah, I mean, the reward for dealing with the convoluted budget process and passing a budget resolution over the obstacle of the vote-a-rama and leaving the floor open to amendments of all kinds, including very troublesome political amendments, is that you get this shot at reconciliation. And if you're willing to go through the trial again, then yeah, you would get the reward again. And there might not be any analogy whatsoever between now and 20 years ago with Robert Dove. Anyway, she nonetheless says, well, Democrats, maybe you don't want to be so ambitious because you should think about what happened after Dove lost his job, which was what? In the spring of 2001, the Republican majority stiff-armed one of its most independent-minded members, then Vermont Senator Jim Jeffords, on his push for special education funding in that year's budget. Jeffords then voted in favor of a Democratic amendment to cut the size of the Republican tax cut. Days after Dove lost his job as parliamentarian, Jeffords voted against the Republican budget. And a few weeks after that, Jeffords left the Republican Party, throwing control of the Senate to the Democrats. So that's meant to be a warning. If you fire the parliamentarian, someone, wink, wink, probably, and I guess she's thinking here, the most independent-minded of the Democratic senators, like, in her mind, I guess, Joe Manchin, who's not particularly independent-minded, I don't think. Maybe Kirsten Sinema. Could be anybody, really. But the idea that because when Republicans fired Robert Dove in that related mix of, cross currents there, Jim Jeffords left the Republican Party and began caucusing with Democrats, throwing control of the Senate to the Democrats. The lesson here is if you fire the parliamentarian, Democrats will leave the party and caucus with Republicans and give them control of the chamber is a poor conclusion, I would think. That's the best description you can give to it. I'm not at all sure that the two situations are parallel. We're talking also about telling Jim Jeffords, who was pushing for special education funding in that year's budget, they tell him, no, you can't have it, and we're going to try and pull a stunt with reconciliation to help ourselves, the Republicans, that is. And you are a Republican, but we're not going to help you in all of this. Therefore, that's the same thing as, for instance, saying, Joe Manchin says, I want massive infrastructure spending in West Virginia as my special pet project for including in the budget. What are the odds that Democrats say, no, we want to do more reconciliation bills so that we can pass big, ambitious bills that spend on very, very necessary projects around the country, but not for you. I would think that the Democrats' approach to this would probably be the opposite of the way Republicans approached their dealing with Jeffords. Though he is very independent-minded and gives people fits in the Democratic Party, I think the general tenor of things would be to say, well, one of the things we wanted to spend a lot of money on was infrastructure. You've got a lot of infrastructure projects you're interested in seeing funded. Why don't we use this bill to help you and get you the funding that you want? And I guess Alana Shore's conclusion here is, well, sure, we might give him everything he wants, but we'll have bucked the parliamentarian possibly to do it. And we're not even certain we're going to end up having to do that. But if we do have to do that, the idea that Jim Jeffords left because they dissed the parliamentarian, I think, is a pretty serious misreading of what actually happened. I'd be pretty surprised to find out that Joe Manchin, would join the Republican Party and give them control of the chamber when we've finally wrested the White House back. Give Republicans control of the chamber because he's peeved on principle that the parliamentarian has been embarrassed, even though he also gets billions of dollars of infrastructure spending out of it for West Virginia. I don't read it that way, and I'm surprised that there's anybody who does, and that you can get it published in Politico. Or maybe I shouldn't be surprised that you can get it published in Politico. Look, they're as hungry for content as anybody. All right. Time now for our music to begin in just a second. We're going to get it started on time for our top of the hour break. We'll take that break, come back, anticipate speaking with Joan probably in the fourth segment, and that gives us time to go over some more fun and funky stories from yesterday and a few more quick hits here and there, and maybe even time to jump back into the investigation of the insurrection. What's likely to happen from all of that anyway? There was some exciting news and then some letdown news. We'll give you both, perhaps, next. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Edwards Radio. Let's see, I'll put together my, still working on putting together the agenda here for the next segment. Let's see. One of the, why don't we do this? One of the stories that caught my eye the other day, and I mentioned to you, and I don't know if we ever read it, but I referred you to the stories that... let me jump over to the old Washington Post story here from March 21st, Ancient Times, indicating that the charges being leveled against some of the people who participated in the January 6th insurrection seemed pretty serious. Evidence in Capitol attack investigation trending towards sedition charges. Departing chief says. I thought that was interesting that you would say this sort of thing on the way out the door. Spencer Sue wrote this up again, Washington Post, March 21st. Former interim U.S. Attorney Michael R. Sherwin of Washington reiterated Sunday that he thinks charges of seditious conspiracy could be brought against certain defendants in the January 6th Capitol breach, a rarely invoked charge for those who use violence to hinder the execution of federal law. In a 60 Minutes interview aired on CBS 2 days after he stepped down from supervising the investigation, Sherwin said, "I personally believe the evidence is trending toward that and probably meets those elements." But that should indicate to you that it's a long way from a done deal. But, his opinion on it is pretty interesting, and I believe the evidence is trending toward that. I don't know if I ever thought we would ever get to see such a serious charge laid on these people, although they certainly deserved it. It's just, the trend is usually to committing a crime like that, and we all say, well, it's pretty obviously fairly serious, and then they get treated with kid gloves. And there's some indication that that might be the actual outcome in the end for most of these folks anyway. But let me continue on here. I believe the facts do support those charges, and I think that as we go forward, more facts will support that, he said. And it does seem like the more evidence they gather against these people, the more obvious it is that the crime is as we described it. And it was not much in the way of hyperbole in saying that it was a seditious act, even though we've come to think of sedition as kind of an archaic crime. Sherwin's comments echo those he made on January 26th, when he said, quote, "We are closely looking at, not strongly, but closely looking at evidence related to the sedition charges. We're working on those cases. I think the results will bear fruit very soon." Since that time, prosecutors with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia, which has led the inquiry, have charged about 20 members of the Proud Boys, a far-right group with a history of violence, with leading some of the earliest and most aggressive efforts to breach the Capitol. On Friday, authorities unsealed the latest indictment, charging 4 Proud Boys leaders from Washington State, Florida, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania with conspiracy to aid and abet the obstruction of Congress's confirmation of the 2020 presidential election and police attempts to protect the Capitol from rioting that led to 5 deaths and 130 police assaults. Prosecutors and the FBI have also accused 10 members and affiliates of the Oath Keepers with conspiring to obstruct obstruct Congress in this case. The Justice Department is now looking at whether a larger conspiracy case can be made, including against senior figures in the group, which recruits military, law enforcement, and first responder personnel and claims authority to disobey government orders that some think are part of a conspiracy to strip Americans of their constitutional rights. Members or associates of the two groups make up about 10% of the more than 300 charged so far. Prosecutors have said they expect at least 400 people to be charged. Federal law makes conspiring to overthrow or oppose by force federal authority punishable by up to 20 years in prison, including the use of violence to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of law. Sherwin also told 60 Minutes that he personally witnessed some of the events of January 6th, which is a surprise to me, noticing some people in Kevlar vests, helmets, and tactical gear leave early while he accompanied D.C. police to President Donald Trump's rally on the Ellipse. In an unaired portion of the interview, Sherwin debunked claims about left-wing extremists posing as Trump supporters and discussed tours of the building that took place before January 6th, 60 Minutes reported, and that would be the tours that I think Lauren Boebert is alleged to have given some of the people who showed up the next day and forced their way into the Capitol, thought to be a reconnaissance mission of sorts, except that I don't think that they're really smart enough to execute a real reconnaissance mission. It was just, whatever. They have some idea about what reconnaissance missions include, and maybe Lauren Boebert doesn't, but they just said, give me a tour around here, show me the lay of the land, which doors we can use. It wasn't super effective as reconnaissance, but anyway. Sherwin said investigators are examining whether suspects who toured the Capitol days before the attack were casing or doing reconnaissance runs or on a basic tour. He called the possibility troubling. Sherwin, a career prosecutor from Miami, was named by then Attorney General William Barr to be the top D.C. federal prosecutor last spring while he was on detail to Barr's deputy. Sherwin stepped down on March 3rd, allowing the Biden administration to rename Channing Phillips as acting U.S. Attorney, while the White House and Attorney General Merrick Garland select a permanent nominee. So that of some interest. By the same token, I also happened to see this story reported in Raw Story this morning. Travis Getty's writing under the headline, Trump's MAGA tourists will likely avoid prison for the Capitol riot, but not for the reasons you think. So stop thinking. They're for other reasons. We can go find out what they might be. Many of the MAGA tourists, that's the terminology enclosed in quotes here that they're using, who entered the U.S. Capitol during the January 6th insurrection will probably avoid prison for their role in the deadly riot, but legal experts say that's not simply because they're white conservatives. So it's not just that. And reflecting the reporting of Politico here, Raw Story continues on saying nearly a quarter of the 230-plus defendants who have been formally charged so far face only misdemeanors, and judges, prosecutors, and defense attorneys have all signaled in recent days they don't expect many of those Donald Trump supporters to face significant penalties. What's the headline for Politico's reporting on that? Yeah, many Capitol rioters unlikely to serve jail time, which is too bad, really. Of Quite honestly, a lot of them deserve it. But some of them who didn't fight on the front lines and assault police in order to get in might, I guess really all you could charge them with in the end is trespassing. But I don't know. It seems like there ought to be something extra for them. Anyway, back to the raw storytelling of things. My bet is a lot of these cases will get resolved, and probably without prison time or jail time, said Erica Hashimoto, a Georgetown law professor and former federal public defender. One of the core values of this country is that we can protest if we disagree with our government. Of course, some protests involve criminal acts, but as long as the people who are trying to express their view do not engage in violence, misdemeanors may be more appropriate than felonies. So, following the surge of the crowd who fought hand-to-hand with police to enter the building might not be enough in a court of law to say, well, they engaged in enough violence to charge them with an actual felony. On the other hand, I guess I would make the argument, or at least explore the argument, that assaulting the police officers and punching them in the face and trying to push your way through into the Capitol building is an entirely different kind of exercise if you are alone. In other words, if the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers who are getting charged with this, the more violent felonies in all of this, are not backed by hundreds or perhaps thousands of people in the crowd behind them, making it seem, it's a very different prospect if you're the police. I can't hold all these people off. Certainly not if they're the ones on the front line are beating me and spraying me with bear spray and hitting me over the head with baseball bats. But just even without that, if the thousands of people here just simply keep pushing, I'm not certain I can keep them out. So, I think that the behavior of those on the front lines who are being charged with the violent acts is likely colored by the fact that there are, the MAGA tourists who, I just wanted to go into the building, which wasn't permitted, which is why it's trespassing. But, it seems like a much more purposeful thing than just merely trespassing to say, I defy the right of this government to keep us out of the building because, and it's usually something loosely based on, I read in the Constitution where it says, we the people. Well, I'm a person. That makes me part of we the people. And this is the people's house, as they call it. Well, or it's like the same thing when people say, I am not trespassing by breaking into the Pentagon. I paid for it with my tax money. Yeah. We know that excuse doesn't work. Anyway, I think that there's an added element. I'd struggle for a while probably to describe it, but there's an added element to this idea of, I was just trespassing at worst. People were going in, so I also went in. People were going in, in violent and unlawful ways, and you lent support to their violence by being part of the crowd behind them, and we should recognize that. But in a court of law, whether that stands up remains to be seen. And a good guess is no, it probably wouldn't. Prosecutors have characterized the rioters' actions as an existential threat to U.S. democracy, but in essence, many of them engaged in trespassing, which carries a 0 to 6 month prison term for defendants with no significant criminal history. Trespass is as mild as we can get, said Ohio State University law professor Douglas Berman, an authority on criminal sentencing. There's really no way in which you can cook the books or the guidelines to do above 0 to 6. This is a case where the aggravating factors are not built into the book. However, some defendants may receive stiffer penalties due to social media comments or video evidence from the insurrection showing they intended to prevent lawmakers from certifying Joe Biden's electoral win, which resulted in felony obstruction of Congress charges. The obstruction charge, which is essentially the same as obstruction of justice, carries a maximum penalty of 20 years in prison. The punishment has to be proportional to the harm, but I think for many of us, we'll never forget watching TV January 6th and seeing people wilding out in the Capitol, said a federal prosecutor, Paul Butler, Georgetown law professor. Now, everybody who was there was complicit, but they're not all complicit to the same degree for the same harm. Butler said first or second misdemeanors almost never result in jail time, and he hopes the disposition of some of the lesser charges results in a teachable moment for prosecutors. A lot of black or brown people, they don't get the benefit of individual judgment or breaks, Butler said. I think this will be a record number of white people who appear in federal criminal court in D.C. If they're receiving mercy, the prosecutor's office should make sure that the same mercy will be applied to all the other people they prosecute, who are mainly people of color and low-income people. Well, that would be nice, but no guarantee that that's going to happen. Anyway, so two sides of the coin here. Some who say it's encouraging to see some very heavy charges being laid down on the leaders of the insurrection, and others, though, reminding us that people who weren't necessarily on the front lines and battling with the cops might not do any jail time at all. And, maybe we can live with that, maybe not. I don't know. We'll see what the evidence bears out. All right. I would like to take a look at what else is here in Pocket for you, but for some reason it's not even allowing me to continue scrolling. All right. Just reload the page and handle things that way. Let's see. Other items worth noting. How about this one? When we left yesterday, we previewed what was going on Justice Putnam's West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. One of the few things we managed to sneak in by way of teaser was that, how did he put it? That there was one of the, I'll find it here. Yes, the Trump lawyer on his campaign to overturn the 2020 election, now playing a central role in the GOP effort to suppress voting around the nation. And I wondered, who is that Trump lawyer? Who's still left calling themselves a Trump lawyer at this point and participating in this? And we thought, maybe it's one of the crazy Kraken lawyers. And it kind of is. Anybody who served in this effort is kind of one of the crazy Kraken lawyers. But it's not Sidney Powell and it's not Lynn Wood. As it turns out, it is, what's her name? Let me grab it for you because I took a look at the article. It's kind of surprising. I wanted to know who it was. And the article that Justice had for me was from The Independent, the UK paper. Names right up top. Cleta Mitchell, you remember her? She was the one whose voice was heard on the phone, the recording of the phone call between Trump and Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State down in Georgia. There were, of course, you'll recall, several telephone calls between Trump and officials in Georgia trying to get the results reversed. Cleta Mitchell, though, is the one whose voice we hear trying to convince Raffensperger to find those votes. It's Trump is the one who asks him to find votes, but Cleta Mitchell trying to give legal legitimacy to this request. She's also the one that I think contradicts him. There's an exchange in there where Trump makes some wildly stupid claim and then says, well, we're not trying to do this. And then she says, yes, we are. I don't know. I can't remember exactly what that exchange was. But Cleta Mitchell, the lawyer who advised Trump on overturning the election, takes a leading role in voting rights battle. So let's take a look at this story. James Crump reported for The Independent. A Republican lawyer who was an advisor. We're not going to be able to take a look at it because firewall. Unless, of course, it's in Pocket. We can take a look at it. Great. Don't tell The Independent. A Republican lawyer who was an advisor to former President Donald Trump during his unsuccessful campaign to overturn November 2020's election results. Now a central figure in the party's efforts to change voting laws across the U.S. What a surprise. If you can't beat them, by making them overturn the election results, well, we will revise the voting laws such that we will never have to ask you for that favor again. Cleta Mitchell, 70. I don't know that it's relevant that she's 70 years old, but there it is. A veteran GOP attorney who was previously on the board of the National Rifle Association, was one of several advisors on a January phone call in which Mr. Trump asked Georgia election officials to, quote, find enough votes to declare him the winner of the state. The call came after Mr. Trump became the first Republican to lose Georgia in close to 30 years, after Joe Biden was named the winner of the state. The Associated Press reported on Saturday that Ms. Mitchell is now leading the efforts to create tighter state voting laws while fighting Democratic attempts to expand ballot access at a federal level. Ms. Mitchell, who confirmed she is in contact with Mr. Trump regularly, said in an interview with the AP that, quote, people are actually interested in getting involved and we have to harness all this energy, unquote. She added there are a lot of groups that have projects on election integrity that never did before. That's, of course, because election integrity is their code word for voter suppression, and they are mad that they lost Georgia and lost the presidential election. They know that if only white Republicans are allowed to vote, then they won't lose the presidency so often. Mr. Trump has made repeated false claims of widespread voter fraud in last year's election, seemingly prompting more than 250 new voting restriction proposals in 2021, mostly by Republican officials. On Thursday, Georgia's Republican Governor Brian Kemp signed into law a widely condemned measure requiring voters to present ID to vote by mail. The law also, of course, bans food or water being provided to people waiting in line to vote, with Biden describing the legislation on Friday as Jim Crow in the 21st century. In response to the new law, the AP reported that Democratic officials have accelerated efforts to push for a federal election overhaul bill, which would allow anyone to vote by mail and register citizens to vote automatically. However, Ms. Mitchell, alongside many Republicans, argued that the bill encroaches on state control over elections and could give Democrats an unfair advantage. The left is trying to dismantle 100 years of advancement in election administration, Ms. Mitchell said, adding that the party's two different approaches mean we're watching two different movies right now. And we are, because, of course, their idea is, well, we've advanced 100 years in election administration by preventing people from voting because there's massive fraud all over the place. And, you know, if the premise is that you're doing these things to prevent that massive fraud, and that massive fraud isn't taking place, well, then duh, you've lost the premise for your actions. As part of her efforts to change voting laws, Ms. Mitchell is leading a $10 million initiative that's pushing for new restrictions on voting and is a senior legal fellow at a conservative organization in opposition to the Democratic proposals. Mitchell resigned from her position at the law firm of Foley and Lardner on January 6th. What do you know? After she assisted Mr. Trump in the phone call to Georgia's elections chief, pressuring him to overturn his election defeat. That's a good result. Anyway, despite leaving her long-term job, Mitchell said that the move was a blessing, telling the AP that one of the great advantages of resigning from my law firm is that I can devote all my time to something I love, which is cheating people out of their right to vote and illegally trying to overturn the results of the election. She should have been fired from that job, but I guess they let her resign. And it's one of the great advantages. One of the great advantages of resigning from her law firm is she can now be paid through the Republican grift machine, which might in fact be more lucrative than being a partner at this firm. What could possibly be better for someone like her, except, working on an honest case that might actually help the country rather than hurt it. But, she's into power, so it ain't going to work. All right, let's see. Other bits and pieces of information to pass on. Let's see. Gosh, there's still so many. Let me get to this one. Slight departure from the subject matter so far today, but I think an important thing to check in on. A piece from AP just the other day. The headline or the byline here is for Alan Suderman. AP sources say, SolarWinds hack. The SolarWinds hack got emails of top DHS officials. You may remember this story from a while back. Suspected Russian hackers gained access to email accounts belonging to the Trump administration's head of the Department of Homeland Security, which is really just where you don't want the Russian hackers, and members of the department's cybersecurity staff, whose jobs included hunting threats from foreign countries, the Associated Press has learned. So I will say they're doing a bang-up job doing the hacking over there in Russia. And I think it was probably all of our impressions that Russia was doing less hacking this time around, but I guess they didn't. It was less targeted at the elections and more targeted at just the people you don't want them messing with. The head of the Department of Homeland Security and the staff dedicated to trying to make sure that Russians don't get into the account of the head of Homeland Security. On top of all this, the additional layer, of course, is the Homeland Security Secretary we're talking about is Chad Wolf, the guy who was illegally serving in that role and should never have been there in the first place. So that's just an additional aggravating factor for all of us. The intelligence value of the hacking of then acting Secretary Chad Wolf and his staff is not publicly known, but the symbolism is stark. Their accounts were accessed as part of what's known as the SolarWinds intrusion, and it throws into question how the U.S. government can protect individuals, companies, and then institutions across the country if it can't protect itself. The short answer for many security experts and federal officials is that it can't, at least not without some significant changes. The SolarWinds hack was a victory for our foreign adversaries and a failure for the DHS, said Senator Rob Portman of Ohio, top Republican on the Senate's Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. We're talking about DHS's crown jewels, so to speak, I would say. The Biden administration has tried to keep a tight lid on the scope of the SolarWinds attack as it weighs retaliatory measures against Russia, but an inquiry by the AP found new details about the breach at DHS and other agencies, including the Energy Department, where hackers accessed top officials' schedules. The AP interviewed more than a dozen current and former U.S. government officials who spoke on condition of anonymity because of the confidential nature of the ongoing investigation into the hack. The vulnerabilities at Homeland Security, in particular, intensify the worries following the SolarWinds attack and an even more widespread hack affecting Microsoft Exchange's email program, especially because in both cases the hackers were detected not by the government, but by a private company. In December, officials discovered what they described as a sprawling, months-long cyber espionage effort, done largely through a hack of widely used software from Texas-based SolarWinds Incorporated. At least 9 federal agencies were hacked, along with dozens of private sector companies. U.S. authorities have said the breach appeared to be the work of Russian hackers. General Paul Nascone, who leads the Pentagon Cyber Force, said last week that the Biden administration is considering a range of options in response. Russia has denied any role in the hack. Since then, a series of headline-grabbing hacks has further highlighted vulnerabilities in the U.S. public and private sectors. A hacker tried unsuccessfully to poison the water supply of a small town in Florida in February. I missed that one. And this month, a new breach was announced involving untold thousands of Microsoft Exchange email servers that the company says were carried out by Chinese state hackers. China has, you'll never guess, denied involvement in the Microsoft breach. Senator Mark Warner, a Virginia Democrat and head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, said the government's initial response to the discovery of the SolarWinds hack was disjointed. What struck me was how much we were in the dark for as long as we were in the dark, Warner said in a recent cybersecurity conference. Wolf and other top Homeland Security officials used new phones that had been wiped clean, along with popular encrypted messaging system Signal, to communicate in the days after the hack, current and former officials said. One former administration official who confirmed the Federal Aviation Administration was among the agencies affected by the breach said the agency was hampered by its response by outdated technology and struggled for weeks to identify how many servers it had running SolarWinds software. The FAA initially told the AP in mid-February that it had not been affected by the SolarWinds hack, only to issue a second statement a few days later that it was continuing to investigate. And then I guess they discovered, they had been affected by the hack. Anyway, that's all we have time for, I think, in this particular segment. And I think it still remains to be seen exactly how extensive the hack was and what the value of the information was that we lost control of here. But suffice to say, for now, absent the technical details of this thing, just a pretty major embarrassment, but probably kind of par for the course for the incompetence in the Trump administration, if it was even that. I mean, with the Trump administration, you never know. They may very well have invited it and don't consider it an attack at all. Still remains to be seen. All right, we'll be right back with more after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just time out here while I check Joan's vaccine passport, because I'm a big communist or whatever. Just updated. So you were just telling me, what's your status? I mean, do you want to share?
On Thursday, I will have made my 2 weeks for my Johnson & Johnson shot. So
okay, excellent.
2 more days and I can start raising hell.
Okay, I think so. Yeah, I'm starting to get people talking to me about, well, now if you're all vaccinated, maybe you can all come over to my house, and I'm getting a little nervous. So I think we need to wait a little longer before we do just completely go bananas. And of course, in this case,
I'm not going to go bananas, but
well, this guy is
I might
specifically
take my mother and aunt to go see their brother who lost his wife at Christmas time 2019, and thus hasn't been able to see anybody in the family because that was at Christmas time and we couldn't travel because of snow, and then everything happened. So
right. Well, now that's not going bananas. This guy.
So it's not a great way. No, it's not going bananas.
Right.
Getting an octogenarian group together.
Right. No, that's
for
fine.
A belated wake, but
It seems a different prospect than I'm getting invitations like, everybody should come over to my house and we'll have a giant party. Well, that might not be quite the thing to do. I think we're supposed to wait on that. So
I did go into well-masked, and it's a small grocery store, and I trust it, but I did go into it on Sunday, and it felt really weird and uncomfortable.
Oh,
I'm going to have to ease into this public life again.
Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, those of us who've had to take additional precautions because we're living with folks who are particularly susceptible, I mean, we don't have that situation at home, so it's been some time since we've been back in stores with masks, but it does feel different.
I've only been doing curbside pickup because I live with an octogenarian, and I want to make sure my mother is not going to get sick on my watch.
Yeah.
That's been my mantra for over a year.
That's the thing to do. And I mean, look, if it's available to you, I mean, it's a great convenience. I haven't done much in the way of curbside pickup, mostly because, well, one, we're living in different situations. And I also thought, should I make people who do the curbside delivery busy with me who doesn't need it for, and then they won't be able to do it as quickly or conveniently for people who do need it. So I thought I would stay out of the way. But, I mean,
you're a good person.
I'm relatively healthy, trying my best. And, I just figured it made sense. I don't know that there's any, necessarily overwhelming demand for curbside delivery from vulnerable people here or not, but it just made sense to me. But it's been pretty good compliance around here anyway, mask-wise. There's very few people. I don't think I've run into anybody who's completely maskless in months. So that's pretty good.
That is good.
So that's
not the case here, but
no. Right, everybody burned them there. And then you had to shut the Capitol down, I understand.
Yeah.
That's pretty smart.
They had COVID outbreak in the legislature over the last couple of weeks. Has them out until next week, I believe.
Oh, still
Which,
out. Okay.
Unfortunately, it wasn't permanent because this has been the most insane session we've seen. And for Idaho, that's saying an awful lot.
Well, yeah. Maybe you should show up and cough or something. See if I can get them to close again.
Well, they're for the next week, they're out.
Okay.
I wish it would last longer.
So
I wish it would be permanent. We don't need these people, really. They do more harm than good.
Yeah, well, all right. We'll see how it goes, and maybe somebody, I don't know, there's another surge on. Maybe they'll extend or have to extend their closure. I've been watching this morning the freak out over vaccine passports, as they are terming them, but it seems like a coordinated talking point for sure today, and from every corner of Republican land.
Because it means the end of all freedom. It's the end of Western civilization.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I figured Marjorie Taylor Greene would chime in, and I did see finally someone sharing it on Twitter that, yes, she's decided that any company that requires this vaccine passport, even though it's not a thing necessarily, but anyone who requires it was engaging in, how did she put it? I think that's what was so surprising about it. Corporate communism, which I didn't know was even a thing. That's a new one on me. I would like to explore corporate communism, but yes, she doesn't know a great deal about what she's saying. So
no.
All right.
No. Thank you, Georgia.
Yeah. We really super appreciate it. And now it'll be more difficult to get rid of her than ever, I guess.
I guess so.
Though I suspect there'll be people drinking water in line in Northwest Georgia and doing so freely and sharing it freely and pretending there's no
it's gonna be interesting watching how that part of the law will be enforced.
Yes.
I don't think it will.
I think it would be pretty difficult to do, although that's just an invitation to enforce it selectively, I guess, and arrest as many people in Atlanta of color as they can.
You know what they didn't outlaw?
No.
Having a placeholder in line for you while you go over to the food truck to get your food and drink.
Is that right? Okay. I mean, maybe. I don't know. I don't know whether that'll work out the way they think. I did see, I think, Eric Erickson saying, well, see, that's the reason that the law is not so draconian. You can have someone hold your place while you go get food and water. But, yeah, we'll see how that works out as people with food and water stroll back into line and people behind them say, where have you been?
Yeah.
What is that? That doesn't work. I don't know. We'll see how people handle it. But, okay. So, I don't know.
It's not something really to make light of. And that's the least. I mean, that's a horrible thing, inhumane for the Republicans in Georgia to do. But there's a lot in that law that's worse.
Right. We've had opportunity to mention that, and well, you want to highlight or low light the worst parts of your.
Well, okay,
your
ballot
view?
boxes.
Okay.
They have to be indoors. And there are many fewer of them. The restrictions on weekend voting, the shortened absentee voting period, the requirements for ID to be able to get an absentee ballot. They're taking away, just the simple signature match. It's every barrier that they could possibly think of.
Do you know what they intend in terms of do you photocopy your driver's license and send it in with your request? Is it that?
You have to have, you've got to have your ID number. You provide your ID number on your application.
Are we sure that's not a Holocaust and corporate communism requiring?
Yeah, that sounds awfully.
Show me your papers, isn't
liberty?
Yeah.
Threatening.
I mean, all the complaints this morning are, well, oh my God, this is now we're in the show me your papers phase of the totalitarian takeover by Biden.
Yeah,
We'll
talk
prevent
to
it
brown
by...
people in Arizona about that one.
Yeah.
Is just
This is kind of amazing. So don't show me your vaccine papers. That could actually hurt if you don't have them. But show me your...
well,
whatever.
they're also talking about how to forge vaccine papers.
Of course they would be. And you know what? Go ahead. Fine. Go, you do it, and then we'll just arrest you for the forgery. And you'll say, but freedom. It's a First Amendment. I have a First Amendment right to write whatever I want on this piece of paper. Okay. Why don't you put, $100 legal tender on it and see how that goes.
Yeah, there's that. We're just as sane as ever in the Republican Party.
Fantastic. All right. Well, let's see.
Are you there?
Yes. Oh, are you not hearing me? Are you? Are you there? Or am I there? Are you there? Let's see. Did I hit something? I hit a button there. All right. How about now?
I was just about ready to call you back.
Oh, no. All right. Yeah, I see. There was didn't make any sort of noise, but I saw it go to, the mute sign was on, and I moved my keyboard, and I guess I hit the space bar. I didn't even know I've learned something new about Skype. You can mute it with a space bar. All right, I'll try that again.
I don't touch anything on the keyboard when I'm Skyping because
that happens.
Paranoid.
Right. All right. Well, let's see. I was going to ask you about what else might be on your radar. Have you seen anything about the plans for expanding the use of reconciliation?
I have,
okay.
and I'm kind of curious about it.
Me too.
Schumer thinks that he has a magical parliamentary trick to get at least one more reconciliation, and two basically. So we would have a total of 3.
Okay.
And
in this year,
it's just how he interprets Section 304 of the 1974 budget law to say, yeah, you can add another one in.
Okay.
But he has to have the parliamentarian agree with him. So.
All right. So this is it's the same idea of passing a revised budget resolution that would then include some more
it's his interpretation of the existing one.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah. Let's say I'm reading it again. I read it yesterday and I don't have it fresh in my mind.
Oh, all right.
Okay. He recently argued, this is according to Axios and top policy ace Schumer, he recently argued to the Senate parliamentarian that revising this year's budget resolution could trigger an additional set of reconciliation instructions. So he could they've already done basically next fiscal year with the COVID relief plan, and then they could go into the fiscal year beyond that, correct? So this would be retroactive revising 2021's budget resolution.
Yes, I think so.
Is his third bite at the apple.
Okay. So are we talking about then an actual... Yeah, I'm still not clear entirely on whether this means passing an actual resolution, a new... Not totally new, but a revision of the existing budget resolution, complete with 50 hours.
For 2021, yes.
Okay, so that would be interesting. I'd be interested to see if the parliamentarian didn't allow it. Like, if you want to go through the torture of another vote-a-rama, you should get the benefit of another reconciliation. If there's instructions in it, what's the problem?
Yeah.
So that will be interesting. And I thought that they might have originally approached the parliamentarian with the interpretation that the current budget resolution was somehow entitled to one more reconciliation bill, and I didn't see how that one was going to work, but maybe they tried it and then got rejected and then said, how about if we pass the new one entirely? And I guess they're still pondering that one, which, it would be an interesting move, and I'm sure Republicans would cry and complain and say it's unprecedented, and I don't know if it is or not. But if it's Section 304 allows you to do it,
yeah.
Then if it's unprecedented, who cares? It's allowed.
If Republicans, if it's this or your precious filibuster, well,
I guess. Right. So, I would be very interested to see them try this, and they would be complaining. But then, I mean, the counter could be, this is the most open the Senate floor has been in decades.
Right. Look at this opportunity you have for amendments. It's 2 more Votaramas. Yeah. Look at all the opportunities we're giving you.
I mean, you lose them all because you propose unpopular legislation.
Ridiculous things.
So,
but,
what can I tell you?
Here's your shot.
But, yeah, I mean, it really would be difficult to refute, although I guess they could just lie, and that's easy enough for them to do. But this would be the most open. There's the most voting going on, the most amendments being offered, the least restrictions on those amendments and on floor time, and more work and more working hours by the Senate than any in recent memory. If they were to go through and revise this thing, what could the complaint be except that you're losing? That would be it. That's it. And I don't know. How many times can they revise this thing? They should just revise the budget all year.
It would seem that it would be easier just to cooperate.
Yeah, well.
That's
Maybe this is it forces it.
It's remarkable to me that we've gone through all of this and there are not even 4 Republicans who will say, okay, we'll sit down with you and we'll figure stuff out.
Yeah. Well, that would be interesting.
Much less 10. There will never be 10.
No. I mean, I suppose they could squeeze them a little bit, and I mean, it really would be something. I don't know, if I'm counting on the idea that, like, oh, well, they'll go on the Sunday shows, and then they'll be asked reasonable questions about what's going on and give reasonable answers, and that's not going to happen. But the idea of Republicans going on to complain about this or be pressured on the filibuster and say, if they get rid of the filibuster, then we won't have the pressure to reach bipartisan compromise, and there's going to be a tyranny of the majority, and they're going to run roughshod over us. But again, I don't know, if Chuck Todd were to wake up somehow and say, I don't understand. There's more amendments being offered, more opportunity to affect legislation. There's more debate going on, more amendments being offered, less restrictions on amendments than has been the case for years and years and years. And you're saying that the only way for there to be any real debate and an exchange of ideas is to keep the filibuster, which prevents anybody from, voting on any of these things. How does that work? And aren't you being unreasonable? Work? And, then it would be like, well, we're out of time. We have to leave. Ron
right.
Johnson says it's communism.
Chuck Todd is not going to ask Republicans if they're being unreasonable.
Right. Well.
But it's a nice idea.
Maybe somebody else will, and I don't know who. But, it's to me, it seems like a pretty interesting play, and maybe you could revise the budget over and over and over again. And there's still a number of classes of legislation that are still excluded from being in a reconciliation bill. So that's problematic, and you'd never get around to a minimum wage vote. But, the filibuster prevents that already. So
there's also the issue that the For the People Act can't possibly be shoved into a reconciliation bill.
Yes, right. I mean, there are definitely things that couldn't be done.
And voting rights is kind of critical.
Yeah.
So really the filibuster has to go. Good for being creative, Schumer. Mm-hmm. Good for saying to Republicans, look, we're going to figure this out and we're going to do something that's really, really popular. And maybe instead of blocking this, you just want to go along with it. Or maybe he's doing it to prove to Joe Manchin that there's no way you start out with something as popular as infrastructure that everybody's going to want, and it's money to go to your state and your district. Yeah. And how can you possibly oppose this? and they do en bloc, and so we can go to Manchin and say, yeah, look, we don't have a choice. So, I have no idea if that's what Schumer's trying to do, whether he really thinks he can do 2 more reconciliation bills and get all this stuff done. But we still have John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and we still have For the People, and we have Georgia. So,
all right. Yeah, none of those will fit under a reconciliation, but it would be interesting to take a crack at it and say, yeah, I mean, maybe that's the way it is demonstrated to Joe Manchin. Look, the most, what should be the most broadly popular, bipartisan supported infrastructure bill, which they said they wanted to cooperate on. If we remove the possibility of their blocking it and say, the bill's happening, to me, that's like, and not only the bill's happening, but it's going to happen, and it's going to happen with a vote-a-rama, and you can offer any amendment you want. And they still say no unanimously. Then you say, Joe, where are you going to get these guys to cooperate? It's a free and open amendment process, 50 straight hours of debate, anything you want having to do with infrastructure. And everything you want is in this.
Yeah.
Talk to your friends. They're going to offer amendments. You're probably going to vote for some of them. And some of them will pass. And then they'll say no.
Yeah.
What do we do? And how in the world is 60 votes
it's a lot of work to go to demonstrate to Joe Manchin that he's being an idiot. But if that's what it takes.
Yeah, that's the task ahead of us. And it is said that infrastructure is
Mitch
the key.
McConnell standing on the floor saying that the filibuster has never been racist would be enough for Joe Manchin to think, maybe I'm not dealing with intellectually honest people here.
Could be. Yeah, well, if that isn't, and we, built some bridges along the way, that's not the worst route around to it. But, they're going to have to move in, and it's kind of has to happen quickly with voting rights, because they'll be conducting elections they'll be ramping up for those elections in a year and conducting them at the end of 22. And,
it has to happen, so we can't count on the courts.
No.
Because Trump, the district court for Georgia is fully Trumpified. And we certainly can't count on the Supreme Court.
Yeah, well, they started this.
Yeah. So
I agree. All right. Well, yeah, I know there was an awful lot of momentum to get rid of the filibuster, at least, rank and file agitation for it, but, we still run into the same brick wall. So I wonder whether this is part of a long-term strategy to demonstrate, but it can't be too long-term, to demonstrate to Manchin.
We don't have enough time for it to be too long-term, but it's possible. It's possible.
Right.
And, at some point, I think that perhaps the two Joes have to get together, and Biden just has to say, look,
yeah,
I can't do anything with you. I can't do anything. So are you going to decide you're a Republican? Are you actually going to flip parties here? Or are you going to help me? And I think everybody's afraid of what decision Manchin would make in that case.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Certainly there's an interest in building that fear up. I was reading something from Politico earlier today saying, well, you don't want to mess with the parliamentarian or threaten to fire the parliamentarian, because last time that happened, Jim Jeffords switched parties. But it's like, but it wasn't because of what they did to the parliamentarian. It was because of what they did to him, which is different, especially if you fire or threaten the parliamentarian now on behalf of Joe Manchin and his infrastructure plans. I don't know that Joe Manchin's going to be mad about that, but we'll see.
We will see.
And I'd like to see soon. Well,
and
all right.
Speaking of federal judiciary, since we brought that up a little bit.
Yes.
Biden announced 11 nominees today, which I believe is beating even Trump's record.
You know, I don't know that the number is that important, but you should absolutely promote it by saying record-breaking. No other president has ever done it.
Yes. By this point in his
You're
first
right.
term, President Obama had made only one judicial nomination, and Trump had only made 2.
Really? Well,
in the first 100 days. So, yeah, we've got 11, and we've got 11 very good ones.
That's, I remember now. Yeah, Trump thought it, well, I guess didn't think he was going to be president, whereas Joe Biden was pretty sure. Yeah. You know,
yeah, he's and we've talked about it before in conjunction with the blue slips that he had set out his, early on in December, he sent a letter to Democratic senators saying, get these in and get them in now because I want to do this fast. And I want diverse people. I want people from various professional backgrounds, no more just corporate lawyers. I want public defenders. I want people who have been serving in all professional capacities legally.
That's
so
nice.
These are the people I want, and those are the people he got for the most part and who he's nominating.
All right. That is
including Ketanji Brown Jackson to replace Merrick Garland on the D.C. circuit.
Well, that's a very major appointment.
It's a very major appointment, and they're also putting her up on that step to be the next Supreme Court nominee.
Yeah, I mean that's the feeder court.
Yep. And she is a former clerk for Breyer.
Okay.
So there we go.
All right. Good news for clerks everywhere. I mean, when the judge you've served with gets, if you've been clerking for her or clerk for her now on the D.C. circuit, you're looking at a good shot at a Supreme Court clerkship afterwards as well.
A bright future.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is, and I just sent you the link to the press release about it. It really is a solid group of nominees. Black and brown, black women, as he promised, the first Muslim district judge, the first AAPI woman on the federal district court, the first BIPOC woman on the Maryland district court. He really did, when he said, yes, we're going to look at diversity, he meant diversity. And I think that probably what we're going to see is Durbin playing along. And if on these district court nominees Republicans refuse to play, he's going to say, sorry, on the blue slips. I don't think he's going to have to in this round. I don't think any are coming from Republican states.
Okay.
Let's see. D.C.
Yeah.
Circuit, Maryland, New Jersey, D.C., New Jersey. Yeah, we're not going to go for any Republican states. So,
all right.
Colorado. Bennett Hickenlooper. Nope. We've got two Democrats there. So so we're not going to come up against a blue slip fight this time around.
In terms of blue slips, right. No Republicans hold any of those
district court nominees. So
very good. It is a pretty diverse group. Looking through it, so that is good news. And I guess that's the difference between coming to the White House with a long background in federal service, prepared and knowing how to hit the ground running, versus Jared, I need judges.
Right.
I guess.
Leonard Leo.
Enthusiasm.
Judges.
Yes, enthusiasm.
Exactly. Oops, sorry. Well, that's exciting news, to be sure. And we'll look forward to that battle for their nomination. I'm sure that Republicans now, I guess the task is to scramble and try to find something that they can use to label any or all of them as socialists and communists and whatever else they can come up with.
They don't need evidence. They just make it up.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, I guess ultimately, if anybody's sweating it, you can just say, why don't we just say they, lived in Russia for 20 years? Right.
Honestly, Mitch McConnell stands on the floor and says the filibuster doesn't have a racist history.
Yeah. Then why not just say anything?
They can say anything.
Any indication of how soon we'll hear about hearings for any of them, or just a wild guess at this point?
No.
Okay. Well, it's good news to see them.
Probably fairly soon, though. Judiciary doesn't have a whole lot else to do right now. So.
I guess that's probably true. So the plates are cleared and they can begin on these people. This is fantastic news. And yeah, I love the fact that it's record-breaking. It's going to ruin his next wedding-crashing speech. All right. Well, thanks, Joan. Thanks for coming by. And, hey, good luck with the impending immunity, we hope, from COVID-19.
Thank you.
And we'll check in with you next week to see how everything's going. All right. See you then. Time now for us to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy.
You've been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, we got everything rolling. We're a little bit behind because the enthusiasm button went off instead of our music, but okay, small glitch I think we can overlook, especially when the reward at the end of the music is the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy and its eclectic roundup of news from around the country and around the world coming next.